I barely slept that night. I spent hours thinking over the proposal of the project. I had only seen a short document with the objective and some rough sketches of suits and programs. There were more documents, but I hadn't had the time to check them out. It seemed like Stark had been brainstorming a lot about it, but hadn't really started to do anything more. I wondered again and again why he wanted me to join in. I was clearly the opposite of the right candidate for this enterprise. He needed someone with a good heart and a lot of motivation. I was an up-and-coming criminal that struggled with finding the will to get up and go to the bathroom. I didn't say a word to Leslie about the interview or the project. When I arrived home, it was way too late, and she was already asleep. I had taken some food to my room and gone to bed. I hadn't even had the time to revel in the feeling of my long-missed room. The hardware pieces I had scavenged over the years were still there, as if Leslie hadn't even dared to venture inside. But I didn't make sure they were actually untouched. I went to bed directly. I woke up way before her, too. Got dressed and had breakfast. I walked to the tower since I still didn't have a functioning underground card yet, and got there at 9 a.m. sharp. I had gotten lost a couple of times on my way there. I hadn't seen New York in months, and I wasn't used to the nice part of Manhattan. I was very disoriented. Only a couple employees were roaming around, but the receptionist that spoke with me the day before was there. She clearly recognized me. I was going to go directly to the lab, ignoring her, but she called me. "Miss Atwood," she said. I stopped and sighed before approaching her desk. "Yeah?" To my surprise, she gave me an employee card with my name and picture on it. I had no idea where they'd gotten the picture from, but I was glad it wasn't the one that had been used for my criminal record. "Thanks," I said, grabbing the card and caressing it carefully. It hadn't hit me until that moment that this was actually happening. That it was real. Official. I had a job at Stark's Industries. It was surreal. But there I was, with my own employee card. "You're welcome," she said with a genuine smile, which freaked me out a little, and she pointed me towards the elevator. I waited in front of it, tapping my foot and looking everywhere. I clutched the laminated card, thinking about what it meant. With a job came commitment and responsibilities. People would expect things from me. I had to stop myself from breaking the card and running away. The elevator stopped in front of me, and out went Harold Hogan. "Oh, Miss Atwood," he greeted me. "Hi," I said, getting more nervous about my new situation. "Do you know where Stark is?" Hogan looked at me as if I had slaughtered an entire city and hadn't broken a sweat. I froze. Had I fucked up somehow already? Did my aspect offend him, or had he just remembered his oven was on? "Mr. Stark," he said. "Yes," I trailed off. That was who I was looking for. Why did that surprise him? "It's Mr. Stark, not Stark," he corrected me. Mr. Such a word felt bizarre and unnecessary. I didn't like that. Why did the fact that he was my boss now meant that I had to treat him with a special etiquette? It was the same with the guards at Juvie. They had titles, and those titles implied I had to be respectful to them. Why? Why did I have to give my respect so willingly to anyone who thought they deserved it? Hogan blinked a couple of times, waiting for me to say it. He wasn't going to budge until I did first. "Okay," I bit my tongue. "Do you know where I can find Mr. Stark?" "He's upstairs in the lab," he responded. "He's waiting for you." Right. Thanks. I got into the elevator, and as the doors were closing, I couldn't help but add with a hint of sarcasm. Good day to you, Mr. Hogan. Good day, Miss Atwood. I found Stark in the lab. He had the iron mask on the table connected to one of the computers. I had no idea what he was doing, but he was engrossed in it. Hey, I said, walking in. Hey, he said very calmly, as if on autopilot. Hand me those. I walked closer, waiting for him to tell me what those were. He was pointing towards one of the other tables, but there were a bunch of little tools that I guessed he needed to work on the helmet. I picked one at random and handed it to him. He looked at it, then at me with a surprised face, to which I grinned pathetically. I supposed I had somehow picked the right one. Thanks, he said slowly, and he continued working. He didn't speak for a second, but then pointed towards the table again, maybe needing another one. Papers, he said. That's your contract. I walked over there and picked it up. This thing was longer than War and Peace, which meant it was too long for me to actually read with interest. Can't I get a summary? I joked. He stopped, turning around with this unamused look on his face. I gulped, fearing the harsh reality I faced. I was going to be fired before even having started the job. What an incredible achievement. 2,000 a month, he said. I almost choked after hearing that. Work from 9 to 6. There aren't really any breaks for food, but you can eat here. Just tell Jarvis what you want, and someone will get it for you. There's also an NDA, meaning you can't talk about anything you learn or do in here outside these walls. With anyone. Ever. I had stopped following his train of thought when he mentioned the money. This is, I started. Very generous. He tilted his head a little. This project is really important to me. I blinked a couple of times. He was so serious about it. I picked up a pen and signed where he needed. He went back to what he was doing before. I set the contract on the table and walked over to him. So, I trailed off. I'm officially hired. He stopped and lifted his eyes to me. What am I supposed to do? I asked, rocking on my feet. I supposed he then remembered that he actually needed me to do things, and he stood up. He walked over to another table and grabbed 2 huge binders, filled entirely with documents, and set them on a table near where he was working. He patted a chair. Read up, he said. This is everything you need to know to start working on the project. I opened one of the binders and looked over the papers. I couldn't help but scoff. This is months of code, I said. Years, actually. Meet the inside of Jarvis. Though I only put the latest version, he said, sitting down again to work on his mask. I also included some MIT papers and thesis on robotics, and AI in the other folder, to give you a better understanding of what we're doing. Gee, thanks, I whispered. There was no way in hell I was going to finish all this in just one day. I sat down with a thump, grabbed the second binder, and started with the first sheet. It was an introduction to modern robotics, made by a professor with an unpronounceable name. Once you finish, we'll talk specifics, Stark said, without lifting his eyes from his work. Cool, I said, sounding very defeated. We were in silence, working on different stuff. I was still reading the amazing initial research Stark had prepared for me, while he actually coded things for other projects. I scowled just thinking about it. I definitely felt like an intern, not being able to play with exciting toys just yet. I wanted to do stuff, discover things. The only thing I'd found so far was my hate for reading up on research. It was terribly dull. I darted my eyes on his direction from time to time, jealous of how he was actually doing something. I wanted to think that he was working on Avengers stuff. I bet they had amazing projects, as it ought to be with cool people. The Avengers were a group of remarkable heroes that had come together to fight a battle that no one else could have. The Battle of New York. A couple years ago, in the middle of Manhattan, the skies opened and aliens flew in. Nobody knew what was happening or how we could survive that. But suddenly, a group of heroes saved the day. Now I was lucky enough to be sitting a couple meters away from one of them, Iron Man. It made me want to strive for something higher than what I was right now. Maybe, with his help, I could become someone else. Someone worth saving. "Sir, a Miss Leslie Harrington is downstairs asking for Miss Atwood," Jarvis announced. Mr. Stark and I looked at each other, confused, and I shrugged. I had no idea why Leslie was here. I looked at the clock, and it was only 6 p.m. I hadn't talked to her for the whole day, but she had never kept tabs on me before, so I didn't see why she would now. "Bring her up, Jarvis," Stark said, frowning a little. I didn't move from my seat, and from where Leslie was going to come in, I couldn't be seen. I would prefer if Stark dealt with her. My exchanges with Leslie haven't been the best. The elevator stopped on our floor, and the doors opened, releasing my very flustered guardian. "Leslie! What are you doing here?" Stark asked, half happy, half confused. "Is she here?" she said, alarmed, walking into the room. "Who?" he asked. "Kira!" she snapped. "Is she here, Tony? She left really early and she left her phone." I hadn't even realized I didn't have it with me. I had become used to not carrying it around anymore, since I didn't have it back at juvie. She wouldn't even let him get one word in. "I don't know where she is," Leslie said, running a hand through her hair. "What if she left? What if she's with her friends again? Please tell me she's here." I rolled my eyes and rubbed my face. Why did she have to be so intense? Stark tried to calm her down. "Leslie, she's here. Relax." She closed her mouth and breathed in silence for a minute. "She's here?" Stark nodded, looking in my direction, but I was hiding behind my computer screen. She rested on the nearest table she could find and sighed. "Thank God." I peered over the computer to find Stark resting a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "What are you doing here?" I said. She jumped when she heard my voice closer than she expected. "I didn't know where you were." "I was here," I simply stated. "Chill." "I wouldn't be so stressed if I didn't have a reason to, Kira," she retorted, putting her hands on her hips. "But you have certain tendencies." "Piss off," I whispered. "Excuse me, what?" She started, but thankfully was interrupted by Stark, who stepped between us. "How about I call you if she doesn't show up? That way, you don't have to worry." She glared at me, and then looked at Stark. I could see she trusted him, for whatever reason. I started to wonder if they had ever gone out, even if Stark had told me yesterday that she had rejected him. Her lower lip quivered a little. Not entirely sure. Stark sighed. "I'll send a car for her every morning, Liz," he counter-offered. "She will go from your house to work and back." Leslie hesitated, but she finally gave in. "Okay," she said. "And she'll text you the second she arrives or leaves," he added, and he looked at me with his brow risen. "Won't she?" I pursed my lips. This wasn't fair. I had more fucking freedom in juvie. "She will," I said through gritted teeth. "Okay." She finally agreed with him, but looked at me still angry. "Let's go," she ordered me. "We are going to have a talk when we get home." "No," I said, crossing my arms over my chest. "You are going to talk, and I'm going to have to listen." "Kira?" she warned me. She didn't want me to start an argument in front of Tony Stark. "No, I'm sick of it," I said. "You're always mad at me. Even at juvie. You thought I didn't have enough with my own shit? You only came to lecture me." "Kira?" she warned again. She was getting tense. "And even before that, you were always behind me like I was some sort of criminal." "Because you are," she yelled. "And I don't trust you." I shut up. It was one thing that I said that I was a criminal. But it felt different hearing her saying. I was genuinely hurt, which was dumb. I always knew what she thought of me, but she had never verbalized it. Hearing her say it hurt more than it should. "You're such a bitch," I said out of spite. "Kira!" Stark said, surprised. He had never heard me swear. But I didn't know why it was such a shock for him. If my mind hadn't been somewhere else, his appalled face would have been funny. I licked my lips and looked away. Stark sighed and rubbed his face, and Leslie just narrowed her eyes and glared at me. She clearly didn't know what to do with me. I wondered if she considered taking me back to juvie right then and there. I wondered if maybe she should.